Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea's first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine developed by AstraZeneca arrive at a distribution center ahead of rollout this Friday. The Prime Minister says it's the first step toward a return to somewhat normal life. The South Korean government has announced the sites where around 100,000 new homes will be supplied to cool down the overheated market and get homes to those who need them. And data show last year was the first time that South Korea's population has seen a natural decline. Deaths outnumbered births by about 33,000. The fertility rate at a new low of 0.84. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea's first COVID-19 vaccines, developed by AstraZeneca and made locally by SK Bioscience in Andong, were delivered this afternoon to a distribution center in Icheon, Gyeonggi-do Province. Rollout of the AZ vaccine is due to start this Friday. The nation's health authorities are closely monitoring the situation so that vaccinations start smoothly.
With the vaccinations being delivered today, our nation is starting its historic first vaccinations on Friday. Finally, we are taking our first step toward the somewhat normal lives that we've all been looking forward to.
These AstraZeneca doses will be stored at the distribution center for a day. They'll be sent to local health centers and nursing facilities nationwide tomorrow, starting at 5:30 a.m. Korea time. And South Korea reported 440 new cases of COVID-19 on Wednesday, an increase from the previous day of 84. In a one-week period, the country's recorded an average of 453 cases a day. Of Wednesday's cases, 417 were local, with Seoul and the surrounding area accounting for close to 300. Some of them were cluster infections from family gatherings over the recent Lunar New Year holiday. This Friday, the government plans to announce adjustments to the current social distancing guidelines. The new rules will take effect next week, and a key question is whether the ban on private gatherings of 5 or more people will be lifted. The total number of cases to date in South Korea has surpassed 88,000, and 3 more have died, raising the death toll to 1,576. And we now have a clearer idea of what South Korea's fourth round of COVID-19 relief funds will look like for freelancers and small businesses. A budget for the purpose worth $18 billion, the biggest one so far. The exact amounts people will be getting, though, have not been announced yet. Kim Sung-min reports.
South Korea's upcoming fourth round of COVID-19 relief support will amount to some $18 billion. That's according to the president's chief of staff for policy, Kim Sang-jo, on Wednesday, who hinted that it's almost a done deal. With funds coming from both the regular budget and the supplementary budget, it'll be the largest round of COVID-19 related relief support so far. The support could come as early as March. Though further details have yet to be revealed, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said earlier on the same day that it'll focus on supporting pandemic-hit businesses and boosting employment. The rule is broader and deeper support. It's expected to cover a broader range of people while expanding additional support to those hit hardest. This means covering more types of workers that were deprived of support in the previous rounds due to a lack of clear guidelines. Those include platform workers and freelancers. Also, more businesses will be recipients as the cutoff for support will be extended to those with annual revenues of less than $900,000 from the previous $360,000. Listing employers with more than 5 workers as small businesses is also on the table. The maximum payment per person is likely to be more than $5,400, some $900 more than previously expected. However, experts say the government still needs to make sure the relief funds don't have any blind spots.
Young people and irregular workers have also been hit hard, but support for them is not under discussion. And the biggest problem is that cash support cannot continue as it will grow like a snowball. Boosting the economy to help people cope on their own would be a better way of reducing the damage.
The upcoming round will also cover the country's vaccination plan starting this week. The government expects to submit the budget plan to lawmakers by early next month. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea continues to discuss with Iran issues related to Iran's assets frozen in South Korean banks. The release of those assets, it's understood, are related to Iran's seizure of a South Korean ship last month. But it's widely believed that the fates of the assets and the ship lie with the United States and a resumption of the Iran nuclear talks. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Iran says South Korea has agreed to unfreeze around $1 billion worth of Iran's assets, though Seoul has not revealed any details about those negotiations. Seoul's foreign ministry acknowledged on Monday that there was some form of agreement reached with Tehran, but unfreezing the assets instead would require consultations with related countries, including the U.S. It's widely believed that Iran is pressuring South Korea to unfreeze the assets, and that in a related move, Iran seized a South Korean-flagged ship in the Persian Gulf last month. The ship's release could depend on how fast Seoul moves to release the assets. In total, Iran's assets frozen in South Korea under U.S. sanctions are said to be worth around $7 billion, and Iran says it wants to use part of that to buy supplies against COVID-19. Experts say a resolution depends largely on the prospects of Washington and Iran resuming their nuclear talks known as JCPOA.
The key point of the Biden administration's Middle East policy is nothing but the return to the JCPOA. So the power holders of Islamic Republic of Iran need to show that they are trying so hard to lift the sanctions by the United States for their electorate.
The expert added, however, that it's true that tensions between the U.S. and Iran over the nuclear talks and sanctions could delay the release of the frozen assets. Also, to lift the sanctions, there are some procedures required in the U.S.
Including the United States Department of Finance, and they need a very thorough investigation about the impact of this release of this partial lifting of the sanctions. So it takes a lot of time and also lots of negotiation between and among the relevant parties.
On Tuesday, the U.S. State Department said it wouldn't comment on bilateral negotiations between Seoul and Tehran because there has been no transfer of funds. Its spokesperson added that it wouldn't be a surprise to see the U.S. speak with its key ally, South Korea, when it comes to sanctions enforcement across the board. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has selected new sites for around 100,000 new public housing units as part of plans aimed at cooling the overheated real estate market. Of these units, most will be near Seoul in the cities of Gwangmyeong and Siheung, which will help absorb part of the overwhelming housing demand in the capital. Ji-young has the details.
As part of plans to increase the supply of new homes, the government has chosen the sites for around 100,000 new public housing units. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said on Wednesday that it has selected areas in the cities of Gwangmyeong and Siheung in Gyeonggi-do Province, just south of Seoul, as the sites for around 70,000 new homes. This is part of the plans to build a total of around 830,000 new housing units across the country by 2025 to try to slow down runaway house prices. 4 neighborhoods in Gwangmyeong and 3 neighborhoods in Siheung were designated as the 6th public housing sites for the 3rd stage of South Korea's New Town Development Plan.
70,000 homes will be supplied in areas spanning 1,271 square meters in Gwangmyeong and Siheung, which is 4.3 times larger than Yeouido. This is the biggest of the 3rd stage of South Korea's new towns, and we will develop this area as an autonomous city near Seoul.
The ministry expects that it'll absorb some of the housing demand in the capital as it is located only about 12 kilometers southwest of Yeouido, a major business district in Seoul. Also, the ministry will establish infrastructure so that it'll take only 20 minutes to reach Yeouido by subway. Outside the capital area, the ministry has also announced sites for around 18,000 homes in Busan and 13,000 in Gwangju.
The government will offer pre-subscriptions in 2023 for housing units from the first set of new sites announced today, and they'll be distributed progressively starting in 2025.
The government plans to select more new sites for its public housing development plan by April. 엄지영, Arirang News.
South Korea's population in 2020 recorded its first full-year natural decline, with more deaths reported than births. And with new marriages down too, officials say it's a trend that could continue. Min Soo-kyun has more.
South Korea had its first year of natural population decline in 2020, meaning the total number of deaths has outnumbered the total number of births. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, a total of 272,400 babies were born last year, down 10% from a year earlier. It's the first time that the figure has dipped below the 300,000 mark. The number of newborns per year had hovered in the 400,000s for 15 years since 2002, but later dropped into the 300,000s from 2017 and has now dropped into the 200,000s. The country's fertility rate, the average number of children a woman has in her lifetime, slipped to a fresh low of 0.84. The figure has remained below 1 for the third straight year. The rate is also far below the OECD's 2018 average fertility rate of 1.63. The data from Statistics Korea also shows that there were more deaths than births last year. More than 305,000 deaths were recorded in 2020, up 3.4% from the previous year, resulting in a population decline of about 33,000. This means the country's natural population is falling. Statistics Korea explained that the natural population decline is due to falling birth rates, along with the rise in the number of deaths from an aging population. The agency also said that the decline could get steeper.
A natural fall in population could speed up as the number of marriages sharply declined last year amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which is likely to further reduce the number of births.
Other institutions have made similar predictions. In a report published in December, the Bank of Korea warned that the country's falling birth rate and aging population would likely accelerate due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good to have you back on.
Happy to be here.
Well, on Wall Street, the pressure continued Wednesday on the big tech stocks, and Fed Chair Powell telling Congress, though, that there are no plans to raise rates. In Seoul, stocks plunged today on several issues, it seems. So what's the story in the global and the Korean markets?
Okay, well, the U.S. markets, as you mentioned, were mixed. So was the European market. They were mostly down except for FTSE today. Now, note that these markets have closed, at least on Korean time, yesterday. Asian markets, which opened today, all experienced significant losses. Nikkei, Shanghai, Hang Seng, as well as Kospi and Kosdaq all experienced losses. Kospi went below 3,000 today. And the Kospi fall was triggered by foreigners selling, probably because of the fall in the Chinese market. Now, as you mentioned, Powell did say that he was committed to maintaining low interest rates. That is usually a very good news for stock markets. It should have gone up. But he has been repeating for months that he will allow inflation higher than 2% to continue for a while until the employment picture in the United States looks better. And that might be spooking the stock markets as well as other asset markets, because not only stocks but other assets experienced significant loss in the last couple of days.
Right. Potential inflation there is a concern of many people. Now, another story in Korea. Last year, credit extended to households rose by around 126 trillion won, call it $110 billion. This is the biggest increase in 4 years, and it doesn't look like rates on deposits are going up, only rates on borrowing. So what do you make of the situation, Professor?
Okay, well, it has two aspects. One, for the higher income people, they're using the low interest rates as an opportunity to borrow at a cheap rate to speculate, invest in housing, stock, Bitcoin, so on and so on. And on the housing, even though there are restrictions on housing-related loans, I think a lot of people feel that this is the best opportunity for them to buy housing because the interest rates are so low. Now, the problematic part is the lower income people are also borrowing at a low interest rate, but they're borrowing money to survive. And the higher income people will probably be able to pay the money back, but the lower income people may not be able to, and that's going to become a social problem in the future. Also, another potential problem is that this high debt load means that if the interest rate goes up, even if the coronavirus is defeated, it will take longer to get back to normality because of the debt load. People will be less willing to spend, and if people are less willing to spend, it's going to take longer for the recovery to take place. The ultimate solution to controlling the household debt is to raise the interest rate, even though people who have borrowed may have difficulty repaying. But right now, both for political and economic reasons, interest rates are probably not going to go up in the near future.
So it could be a tricky way out of this in many respects. Professor, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate it, as always.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.